Dresden Files, Book 1 Stormfront is written by Jim Butcher and is a American suburban fantasy. The book follows a wizard detective named Harry Dresden, and he has been given a case by his kind of partner, kind of colleague kind of thing. They have a weird dynamic. Murphy, and there is basically two corpses in this hotel room that have been killed using dark magic. And we follow Dresden solve this mystery, and basically everything that comes into play that fucks him over. Now, getting into the main bulk of this review, it has been over a month since I read this. I needed to sit on it a little bit as, you know, I wasn't entirely sure on how I felt when it ended. I will get into the positives first and then go into negatives and things that I'm a bit iffy on. First things first, Jim Butcher is an incredible author. His writing style is so page turning and so interesting. The way he gives life to all his characters is probably some of the best writing I've seen in fantasy in a very long time. You know, I've not been up to date with some fantasy recently. I've been, you know, I have a massive backlog of books that I need to get to, but of what I've read of some other things currently, this is genuinely one of the best things just in that kind of area. But not only does he breathe life into the characters, the way he describes things to the reader is really easy to digest and paints a very beautiful canvas of what we are seeing. You know, I can hear this book, I can see it, and it's so insane how this is the first book in a series and it's this good level of writing. There's not many books that I've read where the first book is really good from the get-go, and this one takes the cake. It's genuinely crazy how well written it is. Now, going back to the characters, I love the fact that Harry goes through so much shit in this. Like, it is never ending for this man. He's going through shit after shit after shit after shit, and somehow still, like, pursues through all of this. He trudges through so much shit just to find out who this killer is and actually help other people. He's not a good guy by any means. I think that's one of the things I really like about this book is no one is inherently good. You know, there are very good moments and are better people in this, and there's like many horrendous people. But I like the fact that the lines are blurred between good and evil. You know, you can do good things, but that doesn't inherently make you a good person. And some characters do bad things, but that doesn't inherently make them like the worst person in the world. I really like that. I really like that for characters. I like that for storytelling. When there are no good people, there are no bad people. It's just people doing people things, and I find that quite real to real life. And I feel like Jim Butcher has understood how to write people in a way, especially these kind of figures. And it creates engaging characters for the reader to get invested in. You are invested in Harry's life and where he's going and what he's going to do to find this killer. He is a very complex and very flawed character. Again, all these characters are flawed, and that's what's missing in current storytelling. Flawed characters. A lot of characters I've seen are either completely flawed to the point where there's no redeeming features, or they are just perfect. Or we take ages and ages and ages for them to have an arc, and I feel like there's no point in continuing on reading that book. I really like the fact that Harry is a flawed character, but at the same time, there were points, as you've seen in this vlog while I was reading it, how difficult some sections were to read, because it's all from Harry's perspective. He's a 20-year-old guy that's a big ladies' man, and he is incredibly sexist, and there's so many misogynistic things in this book, but the reason why I don't hate his guts, and the reason why I don't think Jim Butcher's a fucking creep, is because every female character in this is their own person. All the characters in this book are genuine people. And I will say, going on to Murphy's character, she needs a 10-month holiday away from Dresden with his face on a dartboard and a billion wine bottles. She needs a break. Fucking hell. She goes through the ringer as well. All these characters go through so much, and going back to Harry, the amount of things he does, like his actions are so crazy sometimes, and the consequences for his actions are sometimes crazier. Jim Butcher's really good at doing this. Every character, every action they do has consequences. No matter what it is, it has consequences. And, there was points where I did feel that, could we not, right now, could we just have a moment where we're not like shit in a brick and having to run for our lives and constantly on our feet all the time? But that's also kind of the point of the book, that these characters don't have that time. Time is ticking. So that's more of a nitpick for me than anything. But yeah, the other characters in this that I quite liked were Morgan, who is a kind of memberish of the White Council. If you don't know what the White Council are, the White Council are the kind of wizard organization that, are kind of, they're like the government, basically. They're like the government of wizards and all this kind of weird shit that's been happening. And there's these rules that are the laws of magic. And Dresden has broken one of those laws in particular. Which is why we have this character Morgan, who's kind of watching Dresden at every step to make sure he doesn't break any more laws. And Morgan is very much of the opinion that Dresden is the killer in this book. And he also has a massive fucking sword. It's like, the sword he has is like Berserk level of crazy, or Final Fantasy, and I think that's fucking awesome. He doesn't have much, development or room for like much expression, but what we get from him I really like. It is very much one note. He thinks Harry is the killer, blah 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 blah, but I don't mind that because it makes sense from what we've learnt about Harry and the things we've seen him do. We can go, oh, that makes sense why Morgan is being so hard on him. I hope we see more of him in the later books, and I really want like an awesome moment where he like kills a demon or something. I just want more Morgan. But the same thing with Murphy. I want more from her in the next book, if she even is in the next book. I don't really know much more about from past the fourth book, I believe. I know bits of things that happen, and I know characters sometimes disappear or get killed off. So I don't know if Murphy comes in again or not. But I am hoping at some point in the books we do have like a full-on partner dynamic between Harry and Murphy, and they're both, kind of unable to leave one another and have to stick together. It's kind of similar with this book, but they're kind of more separated than, working together, and I kind of hope we see more of that later on. But going away from characters and moving on to the setting and themes, I love the setting of this. I love suburban fantasy, which kind of makes sense as I like the first book in Mortal Instruments, and I also love Percy Jackson. I kind of love the fact that it's real world, but with weird monsters and wizards and vampires and the supernatural kind of vibe. I think it's really cool, and you can do a lot with it. It's kind of endless kind of possibilities with what you can do with this kind of fantasy. And like, this is also kind of, a feat to Butcher's writing. You can really visualize that this is early 2000s America, and I keep thinking of so many films that are set in early 2000s America, or just kind of American gangster films similar to Martin Scorsese films like Goodfellas. There's many moments, and there is like mob bosses and the mafia in this too, which also kind of help build this world, because it does feel like a Martin Scorsese film at times. And I usually don't like Martin Scorsese films, but I do kind of like his vibe, and so it kind of felt like this was its own kind of gangster story in a way, which is also really cool. We're bringing in more stuff from a load of different genres. And speaking of genres, the way horror is written in this, I'm not that scared of horror. I love horror films, but they don't usually scare me. Most recently, for horror that scared me was Nosferatu. And in terms of books, I don't really get scared that often, but this book had so many unnerving and unsettling scenes. The description Butcher gives you for the first crime scene, ugh, genuinely made me go, ew, that is grim. For a book to evoke that emotion from me, you've done a really good job there. Now, as for the story I found to be alright. I didn't think it was particularly incredible. I did think Butcher dropped the ball in the third act. It gets very tedious, and I felt like it was going to end at several different points, and I really did not know where it was going. But I also kind of knew where it was going. I really did not like the fact that Victor Sells, or whatever the fuck his name is the main villain and is the one with this dark magic or whatever. And I think it's his wife is Monica or something. I don't remember her name. That's the problem with this book sometimes, is I do forget the names of characters, because Dresden kind of uses some different names or says a different last name each time for a character, and it gets a little bit too confusing. And he is just being a dick, but it's also like, as a reader, I need to like know what's going on. If I don't know what's going on, like in the pages, you've done a fucking terrible job. But yeah, I'm not keen on Victor Sells being the main big bad. It kind of, the way his character is described much earlier on is very different to what we get. He's kind of this like, you know, mustache twiddling kind of villain, like, oh, Harry Dresden, you've caught me in my plans, oh no, kind of thing, and I find that really fucking boring, and it's incredibly cliche and overdone, and this book doing that, even though this book is filled with cliches, a lot of them work to its, what's the word? What's the word here? This does not work. I also don't like the fact that Monica spews out exposition for about 10 pages of, you know, what's been going on in her life, and Victor Sells doing all these things to her and all that shit, and is just very contrived way of storytelling. And I kind of, you know, was hoping that this book would have done something really twisted and dark instead of, you know, well, it's a very twisted and dark story, and I wish it kind of kept that going, and then the ending happens and it's not that twisted or dark, it's just a little dark and very edgy and quite tedious. I did think that the kids might be like this monster or this killer, and no, it's just, I kind of was hoping that this book builds up to something so grand and so haunting, and it drops the ball, unfortunately. And, you know, like, in my review on Goodreads, the last 30 pages do feel like it could have ended several times. So yeah, it is just the third act that I'm very unkeen on. Also, other things that I don't like about the ending is the fact that the ending is incredibly abrupt, and we have like 4 or 5 pages of, again, more word vomiting exposition of Dresden going, oh yeah, so this, and this, and this happened, but we're not going to show it to you, we're just going to tell you because reasons. There is probably many reasons why this happens. It may be, you know, a reference to something Butcher likes, or it kind of might be a suburban fantasy thing that I've not really seen happen, but it's just a very irritating wrap-up that seems quite lazy. I'm just going to say it, lazy. It just feels lazy. You know, I feel like in a film setting or a TV show, this might work, but I'm very much a show don't tell person. I'd much rather, especially as a reader, be shown things as opposed to told stuff, and I feel like that goes for a lot of people. They want to be shown things rather than told. You know, sometimes exposition is completely fine and is needed. You do need that balance, so you're not constantly, you know, twiddling your thumbs at what the fuck is going on. Now, with all that being said, I do think this is a very good book. You know, it does drop the ball in the third act, but I don't think the third act is the worst thing ever. There are many details that do bring up the rating, but as I said, Victor Sells, twiddling mustache villain, Monica spewing out exposition, just a lot of exposition, and it gets to the point where there's so many consequences for action and so much going on that it kind of loses itself. It feels like it should have ended like 100 pages ago or something. And while it does feel like there could be many endings in this book, there are a lot of scenes in those last 100 pages that are good and brilliant. And I'm pretty sure the scene between Dresden and that mafia guy, I can't remember his name for the life of me, John something, I can't remember. That scene in the diner, I really like that scene, I think it's really good. So yeah, it's not all bad. I wouldn't say the bad things are horrendous. I'd say, at points it does get a little bit lazy, but I'd say the third act as a rating out of 10, I'd say it gets like a 5 out of 10 maybe. But the first two acts are at like an 8 or a 9, maybe a 10 at points. So for my entire full rating of this book, a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.